All right, so I know you're out there prepping for the IELTS speaking test, and it can feel like a lot to take in. But hey, you found us, and we've been digging into this Ace Your IELTS podcast script.
And it's pretty good.
It is. Really solid advice. So we're going to pull out the best bits for you so you can ace that speaking test.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, the hosts of this podcast, James and Sophia, they emphasize that it's not about being perfect on this test. It's about showing you can communicate well in English. What do you think about that as a starting point?
I think that takes a lot of pressure off, right? Like,
Right.
they're not looking for some kind of flawless robot. They want to see real people using English to, express themselves.
Exactly.
So how do we do that? Well, James and Sophia break the speaking test down into 3 parts. The first part is kind of like the icebreaker. It's all about those familiar topics like, what are your hobbies? What do you do for work? Just to kind of get you
It's like
comfortable.
ease into it,
Exactly.
like a warm-up.
Yeah, warm up your vocal cords, get ready to go. Okay, so we've warmed up. What's next? Part 2. They call this the long turn. And this is where you really get to showcase your speaking skills. So they're going to give you a topic card. And you get to speak for 1 to 2 minutes.
I like to think of this as like, if part 1 is warming up your voice, part 2 is flexing those storytelling muscles. Can you take an idea and run with it in a way that makes sense and is interesting to listen to?
Makes sense. Okay, so we've warmed up. We flexed our storytelling muscles. What's next?
Part 3. This is where it gets a little more conversational. You and the examiner will dive deeper into the topic from part 2. Explore different viewpoints.
Oh, so it's like taking it to the next level. Okay, I can see how that would work. But knowing the structure is only part of the battle, right? What about actually improving our speaking skills? James and Sophia seem to have a lot of advice about that.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
And one of the things they emphasize is practice. The more you speak English, the better you'll become.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like any skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Exactly. They even suggest talking to yourself in the mirror.
Okay, I'll admit that one sounds a little strange, but I can see the logic.
It is a little strange, but it's about getting comfortable with the sound of your own voice speaking English.
Like a singer warming up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so talking to the mirror. What else?
Well, they also recommend recording yourself and then listening back to it.
Ooh, that's a good one. That can be painful.
It can be a little painful,
Hmm.
but it's really helpful. You can hear what you sound like to other people and pinpoint any areas you might want to improve.
Yeah. Like maybe you're speaking too quickly. Or maybe your pronunciation needs a little work.
Right.
Okay, so we're talking to the mirror. We're recording ourselves. Any other practice tips?
Well, they also talk about practicing with specific IELTS themes in mind. Things like travel, education, technology.
Why do you think they focus on that?
I think it's all about being prepared.
Hmm.
Imagine you walk into the test and the topic is something you've never thought about before.
Yeah.
You're going to feel pretty flustered. But if you've already spent time thinking about those themes, brainstorming ideas and practicing your vocabulary, you're going to feel a lot more confident.
Like you're not caught off guard. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of vocabulary, James and Sophia are really big on this idea of expanding your what they call lexical resource. So learning synonyms, idioms, those colorful expressions that make your English sound more natural.
Yeah, they even give the example of saying over the moon instead of just very happy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like that one. It's a good one.
It is, but there's a caveat here.
What's that?
While a rich vocabulary is great, it's more important to use words accurately and naturally. Don't try to cram in fancy words if they don't fit the context.
So it's a balance
Mhm.
between showing off your vocabulary and making sure you're being clear.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. James and Sophia reveal the 4 specific criteria that examiners actually look for: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. I feel like we need to unpack each of these, starting with fluency and coherence. What exactly do those terms mean in the context of this test?
Well, fluency is all about speaking smoothly and logically, without too many pauses or repetitions. Imagine like a river flowing effortlessly downstream. That's what fluent speech sounds like.
Okay, I like that analogy. So it's about flow.
Yes, and coherence refers to how well your ideas are connected. Does your speech make sense? Do your sentences link together logically?
So it's not just about speaking quickly, it's about speaking in a way that makes sense, that the listener can follow.
Exactly.
Okay, so fluency and coherence. Got it.
They even give this tip about using filler phrases, like, let me think for a moment, to buy yourself some thinking time without disrupting the flow of your speech.
That's clever. I like that.
It is. It's better than just sitting there in silence.
Right. Or saying 100 times.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered fluency and coherence. Let's move on to lexical resource. We've already talked about vocabulary. Is there anything else we should know about this one?
Well, they emphasize that. It's not about using the biggest words you can find. It's about choosing the right words for the situation, to express yourself clearly.
So precision over flashiness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And if you happen to forget a word, don't panic.
Oh, no. What do you do?
Paraphrasing is your friend. If you can't remember the word bicycle, you could say a two-wheeled vehicle you pedal.
Ah, so it's about being resourceful, finding ways to get your meaning across, even if you can't remember the exact word.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've done fluency and coherence, lexical resource. What about grammatical range and accuracy? This one sounds a little intimidating.
It does sound a little technical,
Mhm.
but it's really just about your ability to use a variety of sentence structure. So instead of just simple sentences all the time, you want to mix it up with some compound and complex sentences.
Could you give an example of how that might sound?
Sure. Let's say the examiner asks you why you enjoy reading. A simple response would be, I like reading. But a more complex response might be, I enjoy reading because it allows me to explore different worlds and perspectives.
Ooh, yeah. You're not just stating a fact, you're giving a reason and expanding on it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about taking your sentences to the next level.
Yeah, and you don't need to be a grammar expert to do this.
Hmm.
Just try to use a variety of structures. And make sure your sentences are grammatically correct.
That's the accuracy part. So
Wow.
grammatical range and accuracy. Check. What about pronunciation?
So this one focuses on how clearly you speak and whether you're stressing the right syllables and words. You don't need to have a perfect native speaker accent to do well,
That's good to hear.
right? What matters is that you're speaking clearly so that the examiner can understand you.
It's about clarity
Yes.
and correct pronunciation of the sounds.
And the good news is that you can improve this with practice. There are lots of resources out there. Online pronunciation guides. You can even listen to podcasts and try to mimic how native speakers pronounce words.
It's like training your ears and your tongue to work together.
Exactly.
Okay, so pronunciation, we've got that one covered. You know what I find really interesting about these 4 criteria? Is that they reveal something really important about this whole IELTS speaking test. It's not just about vocabulary and grammar, it's about communication.
You got it.
It's about getting your message across,
Yes.
engaging with the examiner,
Right.
and showing that you can use English effectively.
It's like you're giving a performance, showcasing your skills to the best of your ability.
Okay, so we've broken down the structure, explored those 4 key criteria, but there's one more thing we need to address. And this is something that can really make or break your performance on test day.
You're talking about nerves, right?
Exactly. How do we tame those butterflies and walk into that test room feeling calm and confident?
Well, James and Sophia have some great advice about that too.
Okay, I'm all ears.
And that's what we're going to dive into next. So we were talking about those test day nerves. They can really get to you,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
even if you've prepped like crazy.
Yeah, it's like your brain just decides to freak out
Correct.
right when you need it to be calm and focused.
Exactly. But James and Sophia, they have some really good advice for dealing with those nerves. One thing they want us to remember is that the examiner is not your enemy.
Easy to forget that in the moment. You're sitting there under pressure. It's like your brain goes into fight or flight mode,
It does.
and you just automatically see the examiner as this, like, threat.
Right. But that's not how they see it. They actually want you to succeed. They're not there to trip you up. They just want to assess your speaking abilities.
That's a big mindset shift, to see them as like a supportive guide
So
rather than this judgmental gatekeeper.
it is. And it can make a huge difference in how you feel during the test.
Totally agree. Okay, so mindset is key. But what about some more practical tips for actually calming those nerves?
Well, they're big on relaxation techniques. Things like deep breathing exercises can really help.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Just take a few deep breaths, and it can really calm your whole system down.
It does. It helps regulate your heart rate.
Yeah.
And just brings a sense of calm to your body and mind.
It's like hitting the pause button on your anxiety.
Exactly.
Okay, deep breathing. What else?
They also talk about speaking at a natural pace. When we get nervous, it's tempting to rush through our answers,
Oh, I do that.
but that often makes you harder to understand. And it can actually increase your anxiety.
It's counterintuitive,
It is.
but it makes sense.
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. Okay, so we're breathing deeply, we're pacing ourselves. What else can we do to manage those nerves?
Don't be afraid of a little silence.
Oh, you mean like those little pauses?
Yeah, They're perfectly fine. In fact, they can actually make you sound more clear and confident.
It's about embracing those pauses as a natural part of the conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, so pauses are good.
Another tip they give is to focus on the question and answer it directly. Don't overthink it. Or try to come up with the most complex response possible.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, a simple, well-structured answer can be very effective.
Sometimes I think we get caught up in trying to impress the examiner, and we end up making things more complicated than they need to be,
Right.
but they just want to see that you can communicate clearly.
Exactly.
Okay, so focus on the question. Keep it simple.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We're all human. We all make mistakes.
Even native English speakers.
Even native English speakers.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about how you handle those mistakes.
Exactly. If you can just brush it off, correct yourself and move on, it shows that you're resilient.
And it shows that you're willing to learn.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about managing those test day nerves, but James and Sophia also have some great advice for improving your speaking skills in general, even beyond the IELTS test.
Yeah, they have some really interesting techniques.
Like what?
Well, one of their favorites is called shadowing.
Ooh, I've heard of that.
It's a great way to improve your pronunciation and fluency by mimicking native speakers.
So you're basically like an actor taking on the role of a native English speaker.
Exactly.
You listen to their intonation, their
And
rhythm.
you try to copy it.
It's like you're their shadow.
Right.
And you're picking up all those subtle nuances.
Exactly.
Okay, shadowing, that's a good one.
And then there's immersion.
Which is basically just surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Right.
Movies, music, podcasts, books.
The more you expose yourself to the language,
Yeah.
the better you'll become.
It's like creating an English-speaking environment for yourself.
Exactly.
Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
immersion.
And of course, there's good old-fashioned vocabulary building.
Always important.
Always important. They recommend setting aside some time each day to learn new words.
And there's so many ways to do that now. Flashcards, apps, games.
You just have to find what works for you. And be consistent.
Even a few new words each day can make a difference over time.
It really can.
Okay, net vocabulary building. And finally, we have practice tests.
This is where it all comes together.
Yeah, you get to simulate the real test environment.
Get comfortable with the format. Build your confidence.
It's like a dress rehearsal.
Exactly.
And you can do practice tests with a friend, a teacher, or even by yourself.
The key is to make it as realistic as possible.
So you can practice managing your time, staying focused.
And performing under pressure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From test day nerves to long-term speaking improvement strategies. What do you think is the main message that James and Sophia are trying to get across with all of this advice?
I think it's about changing our perspective on the IELTS speaking test. Instead of seeing it as this big, scary obstacle, we can choose to see it as an opportunity.
An opportunity to what?
To show off our skills.
Yeah.
And celebrate our progress.
I like that.
It's about embracing the challenge and seeing the test as a stepping stone towards our larger language learning goals.
Okay, so it's not just about passing a test. It's about becoming a better communicator.
Exactly.
We've covered so much about the structure and those key criteria. But, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about finding your voice. What does that actually look like in a test setting?
That's a good question. It might even seem a little counterintuitive. You're in this formal environment being judged on your language skills, and I'm over here saying be yourself.
Ray, it seems a little out of place.
It does. But think about any speaker you've really enjoyed listening to. What makes them captivating?
It's not just grammar, right?
No, it's not just grammar. It's their personality, their passion coming through.
So even in a test, you're saying it's not about being this, generic, perfect English speaker.
Right.
It's about letting your individuality through.
Exactly. Authenticity is engaging. Think about it. If the examiner asks about your hobbies, instead of just giving a flat response, try sharing a quick anecdote, something that makes that hobby special to you.
Oh, so it's about bringing your own experience into it.
Exactly. And examiners are human too. They've probably been listening to test takers all day.
Yeah.
So when someone sounds genuine, tells a little story, it makes them sit up and take notice.
It breaks the monotony.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we bring more of us into the test?
I'd start with self-reflection. Think about what you're truly passionate about. What are your unique stories?
Even if they don't seem related to the topic at first.
Right, even if it seems unrelated at first. There's often a way to connect it. Let's say you're asked about your hometown, and you happen to be passionate about environmentalism, well, there's your chance to talk about local green spaces or challenges your town faces.
It's like a puzzle, finding a way to fit those pieces of yourself into the conversation.
And don't be afraid to let your personality come through in your word choice. If you're naturally funny, let that shine through. If you're more analytical, use those precise terms you love.
So the goal isn't to erase who you are, it's to express yourself using your best English. Well, I think we've come full circle here. From those initial nerves, to remembering the examiner isn't the enemy, to now realizing this test can actually be a chance to show off our personality and our communication style.
It's not just about grammar rules. It's about using English to express who you are.
And I think that's a really empowering message for anyone out there getting ready to take the IELTS. So to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some practical tips, but also a new way to think about this test. Don't let it intimidate you. See it as your chance to shine, to show the world how you use English. Go in there with confidence, with your unique voice, and rock that speaking test.